Hey guys, this is Jenny here, and today I have a video that I haven't done in a whole year or more. I don't actually remember when the last time I did this was, but I have the mid-year book freakout tag for you guys. So basically this tag is going to ask me about 15 questions to basically sum up my year so far in reading. So far I have read 49 books. I've technically read 47 titles, but I've read 2 different books twice. So I've read A Court of Mist and Fury twice, and there was another one, but I don't remember. Okay, so question number 1 is the best book you've read so far, and for that I chose The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. This was a really hard pick for me because I read so many good books this year. But overall, this book just had it all. It had the wit, it had the humor, it had the character development, it had just an amazing plot and story in general, and it just took the cake. So this centers on a girl named Star. She lives kind of a double life. Her original life is her black neighborhood, her ghetto where she lives, which has been a part of her life as long as she can remember. And the other half of her life comes from the white prep school that she goes to get out of the slums. So she never lets those two lives intertwine until one night she goes to a party over spring break and her best friend gets shot multiple times by a white police officer while her friend was unarmed. So it starts this whole colossal debate, violent protests, and it's all about finding your voice and learning to speak out on issues that need to be talked about. And honestly, this book is just phenomenal. I loved it so much, and the trailer for the movie that's coming out in October, holy crap, it already packed such a punch. I had tears in my eyes watching the trailer. Gave me goosebumps. So hands down, this was one of the best of the year so far. So question number 2 is the best sequel you've read so far. This was also a very hard question for me because I've read a lot of good sequels this year. But the ones that I had to choose, I couldn't just pick one. So I chose Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo, which is book 3 in the Grisha trilogy, and Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas, which is book 2 in the Throne of Glass series. Honestly, it was very hard for me to pick, but Crown of Midnight was just so good. It still had that originality of Throne of Glass, but there were relationships and friendships being built, and there's so much heartbreak and betrayal and reveals that were just so good. And Ruin and Rising just always kept me thinking. I can't even describe how much I love these books, but they were just everything I needed in a sequel, and they were so good. They made me laugh, they made me cry, and they just I loved them so much. I can't even begin to describe it. They couldn't have represented the series more. I mean, honestly, Queen of Shadows came really close to beating Crown of Midnight, but Crown of Midnight still, no, Crown of Midnight has to take it. Okay, so a new release that I have not yet read, but I really want to, and that is Legendary by Stephanie Garber. This came out at the end of May, and it's now the end of June. I've been dying to read this. I pre-ordered this. I've been wanting to read this so badly, but I just haven't had the time to read it yet. But I plan to do so next month. I just am so beyond stoked to get to this. The Caraval series has a special place in my heart, and I have heard fantastic things about Legendary, and I just really need to get to this. Okay, so my most anticipated releases for the next half of the year. Well, my number 1 is Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. There is not a cover for it yet, but I cannot wait for it. I know it seems silly that I'm so highly anticipating it despite not even finishing the rest of the books yet, but I know it's really gonna hurt. I've seen Sarah J. Maas posting that it is over 1,000 pages as it is right now, so I know it's gonna be such a good finale. The next book I'm anticipating is Kingdom of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. This is actually kind of a spin-off novel from the Grisha trilogy. So this takes place obviously in the Grisha realm, in the kingdom, and it has our friend Nikolai from the Grisha trilogy, and it just shows his backstory more and gives some context on what he's going through post Grisha trilogy, and I am so beyond excited for it because I love Nikolai. He was actually one of my new favorite characters ever since I read that trilogy, and I'm just so excited to get my hands on it. So the next book I'm highly anticipating is Escaping Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco. I have a really love-hate relationship with these books. Stalking Jack the Ripper is one of my favorites. I loved Stalking Jack the Ripper. Then Hunting Prince Dracula kind of fell short for me a little bit. It just wasn't as suspenseful and intense as Stalking Jack the Ripper was. It was still good. I really enjoyed the characters and the forensic science aspect, but there was just some stuff that could have improved, I guess. It was such a big book, but so little happened. And so I'm highly anticipating Escaping Houdini because it sounds like such an interesting title, and it takes place on a cruise this time, and I'm pretty sure they're coming to the States, so I'm even more excited, and I just can't wait to get my hands on it because I feel like this is going to be a really good one. So next is Map of Days by Ransom Riggs. This is book 4 in the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children trilogy. Yes, everybody thought it was going to be a trilogy, but now he's like, surprise, now we're going to have a 4th book. And I'm so excited because the Peculiars are coming to America, and I'm so excited to see where this is going to take us. I just can't wait for it. Another book that I'm anticipating is Two Dark Reigns by Kendar Blake. This is book 3 in the Three Dark Crowns series, and honestly, the series has been a part of my life ever since I began BookTube. I got my hands on Three Dark Crowns when I started, and then One Dark Throne came out, and that was just mind-blowing. Like, that book was so good. And the way that it left off, because I read it as soon as it came out, and I was left on such a cliffhanger, so honestly, the next book couldn't come out fast enough. It's about these 3 sisters of Fenburn. Each are born with a different kind of magic. There's elemental magic, there's naturalist magic, and there's poisoner magic. So each sister is given a different kind of power, and they are separated when they turn about 7, 8, around there. And then when they are 16, they are to compete for the crown, and it is just so intense. I love it so much. I can't wait to see how she wraps up the series. And then finally, this kind of isn't really a new release, but the Throne of Glass Collector's Edition is coming out, and I need my hands on this. I don't actually think there's a cover reveal for it, but I'm gonna put it here anyways. But I am highly anticipating that because I love collecting editions of Sarah J. Maas's books. Okay, so question number 5 is your biggest disappointments. So I have Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco and An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I say this because they weren't bad books by any means, but I call them disappointments because I was so highly anticipating these books that when I read them, they fell so flat that I was just rather unimpressed. I was waiting and waiting and waiting for Hunting Prince Dracula to come out after I read Stalking Jack the Ripper, so I was expecting this to be so grand and everybody hyped it up so much. So by the time I read it, I was just like not very impressed because it was so much longer than Stalking Jack the Ripper, but it was so much more dragged out. So that one kind of fell flat for me. And then Enchantment of Ravens, it was like the most hyped book on BookTube for a while there. So I was expecting this to be phenomenal, and everybody was comparing it to A Court of Thorns and Roses. And it just, no, I couldn't, no. I know I had wrote a glowing review on Goodreads for it, but the more I sat on it, the more I disliked it. The character, I just found the main character annoying, and some of the stuff that happened was just so random. And it just seemed like she was too eager to fall in love. Like, I know that a lot of people could say the same for Court of Thorns and Roses, but it took time, for Feyre. So, it just seems like after a couple of visits with, her subject, she was falling in love just by sitting there painting. And there was just a lot of problems I had with that book. So yeah, those were unfortunately my disappointments, but I'm not by any means saying they're bad. They just didn't agree with me. I know a lot of people love them, but I just personally wasn't as thrilled with them as I would have loved to have been.